Hello, everyone, and good evening from beautiful UK. We had a great day today here, and I hope you all had a great week. And welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. Now, we have some beautiful photos in front of us ready to be reviewed. But before we going to do that, for those who never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a professional photographer based in West Sussex, England. I also own and run company called Clever Photographer, where we focus on creating digital assets and courses for photographers. Now, how to join us? If you want to join us for the next episode of Photography Review Show and send your picture over for us to review it, all you need to do is to join our membership, Clever Photographer Plus, and you can find out more about it on our website, cleverphotographer.com/membership. Now, the membership comes for a monthly fee where you get the access to this photography review show, also access to our Facebook group, Clever Photographer Academy, and most importantly, you get access to a monthly photography bundle where you get basically a themed set of tools, usually between 200 and 300 digital tools, which include skies, overlays, textures, presets for Lightroom and Luminar Neo, also sometimes brushes, Lightroom brushes, and so much more. So definitely, if you want to give it a go, make sure you check our website. Once again, cleverphotography.com, and join us already for the next episode of the Photography Review Show. Anyway, moving on, before we're going to start, while some people joining us, thank you very much for those who watching live, and also welcome back to those who watching this as a replay. If you want to watch this show, it's every Monday at 6 p.m. and you can watch it directly on our YouTube channel, Clever Photographer, also on our Facebook page, Clever Photographer, and also in the Clever Photographer Academy. So that's why you can watch it. You can watch it live or in recording. And once that is all out of the way, we can probably start with the images. Looking at some of the messages, Zdeněk, welcome back. Thank you very much. It's great to see you again. Last time I was kind of looking at the pictures, and you were saying that it's almost winter in South Africa because Zdeněk is actually in South Africa. So winter, does it mean that you're going to take more pictures or less? Or maybe a different type? Because a few weeks back, I was looking at some of your pictures, and as far as I remember, you were doing some kind of like a product photography, maybe in a studio, which was lots of fun as well. So if you're going to do that, make sure you send them over so we can look at them too. Anyway, that is all out of the way, so we can start with the pictures. So let's just make sure that I zoom in just like this, so you can see more of my screen. And starting from the beginning, we are using Luminar Neo for the review. So most of the functions we're gonna do, they are pretty much similar. You can do them in all the photo editing applications. However, we like to use Luminar Neo because that's what our YouTube channel is about, so it makes all sense. Now, starting with the first set of picture, landscape, we have some landscape pictures from David. So let's jump straight into them. What do we do when we do the reviews? First, we look at the technical part, where we look at the camera settings, then we look at the sharpness, exposure, and all that stuff to see how you did there. After that, we look at the artistic part of the image, where we talk about composition, the main subject, storytelling, and that part. And finally, at the end, if I feel that there is maybe something that you could improve or edit differently, I try to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So starting with these two pictures here, we have lovely image right here of the tree with a beautiful sun reflection in the water. So let's have a look at it. Now, this was captured with Sony 7 Mark II with the lens 28 to 70 millimeters. Now, looking at the camera settings, we are on ISO 400, 28 millimeters, f16, and 1/750th of a second. So, little higher ISO for landscape photography. Let's have a look when we zoom in. There is a little bit of noise, nothing crazy, but just a little bit. And while we zoomed in, you can also see that we have some sensor dust here, which we can really easily take care of in a second. So for the ISO, as much as you can when you're going out, especially later in the day, you really want to have a tripod with you for landscape photography where there is a minimal other movement. You want to set up your tripod, put your camera on, and then start with the first setting, and that's the ISO 100. You don't want to add any additional noise into your pictures just by high ISO. Some of the cameras already add noise anyway, so let's try to keep it to 100 as much as possible. 28 millimeters give you nice natural result, which looks great here. F16, just making sure that everything is nice and sharp. And also F16 gives you this really nice kind of star or star kind of shine, as you can see on the picture. Now, 1/750th of a second, it depends how it was edited. This is not always correct. However, the exposure does look okay. On the other side, it's really dark in some parts, but from the camera settings, the first I would look at is the higher ISO. I would try to avoid that. Now, talking about the image and looking at it, it has a kind of funny haze around it. You can see this quite unnatural yellow, which can be changed with the auto white balance. And then we have this really strong contrast between the darker areas and the brighter areas. You can also see when I zoom in that it has a slight glow around some of the trees, and that happens when you try to take picture which was generally quite dark as a raw file, and then you try to brighten it. Often these kind of glows and fades around and little edges, white edges happen. So that's when that happened. After that, when I zoom in, also you can see that most of the sharpness is on the tree, but actually at the background, it's all quite soft. So that's another thing to maybe look at in the future. Other than that, it's quite good. Talking about composition, it's quite interesting. I mean, it's a little bit too tight for my liking. I think when your main subject is a tree, I would try to keep a little bit more space around it. I think that would help to give it a little bit more breathing space and really make sure that you kind of focus on the main subject. If you would take this picture and want to put it in a frame, you almost wouldn't be able to do it without cutting a little bit of the tree, which would be huge shame. So just for the next time, maybe do one step back or zoom out even more and get a little bit of extra working space around the main subject and focal point, which is the tree here. Also, I would probably try to straighten it a little bit more. You can see that the houses are kind of falling in a little bit. This is most likely caused by the lens itself. So maybe a little bit of profile corrections and lens corrections would help in overall. So that's about it on this. When it comes to post-processing, as I said, there is some sensor dust which can be easily fixed here in Luminar Neo by going into Edit module, then into the erase tool in the essential section, and then using the remove dust spot option, which basically scans the image for you and try to remove as much dust spots as possible. Now, I know that there were some here, so let's zoom in there. And as you can see, they mostly disappear. Let's have a look at the before and after. However, as there are still some, we can use a simple brush here, paint over some parts we want to fix still. Let's just zoom out a little bit. Let's have a look around the image. I think the rest is looking good from top of my head. So that's about it. Once you select the areas you want to erase and fix, you just click on erase. It takes a moment, scan the image, and it remove these parts. After that, so the next thing I would probably try to fix is the white balance. I think the yellow is a little bit unnatural. So we can change it, for example, by going into develop tool and playing around with the natural white balance. So we could make it a little bit blur again, or we could play around with the tint. So to make it maybe a little bit more magenta. So that would be one thing. If we feel that the yellow is just not natural here, we could also go into the color tool. And in a color tool, we could go into the HSL panel. And here in the yellow, rather than going on the green side and adding more green, we could take the yellow and make it just a little more orange. Then we could go into saturation, bring it down a little bit as well, just to make it more natural. And also in the luminance, just bring it and make it maybe just a little bit brighter. So that's the way how you could play around with that. Maybe add a little less orange as well, and adjust the orange again, go more towards the orange here. So that's about it. Some other things you could do would be the straightening and so on, but we have another image to look at. So we leave it for now and go back to the catalog. In the catalog, we have the second image, which actually I prefer compared to the first one, mostly because you see, this is a lovely capture, but actually in overall, it's very busy. There's lots of things happening in it. There is a strong contrast. There is the sun in the middle. There is a houses. There is a trees. There is the water, a reflection. There is a mix of colors. All of that together is just a little bit too much. And again, maybe that's also because the crop is so tight. So we are looking at the main subject so close that there is just no space for the eyes to breathe. Where the moment you turn it to black and white, suddenly you have much simpler scene which the eye look at, and I immediately really like it. I love the contrast between the white and the black of the tree. It's clean, it's easy, there is also more space, definitely at least around the main subject here. Maybe still a little bit too tight here, but so I would like just to go down a little bit, but in overall it's much easier to look at, and I think in overall much better picture. So coming to, let's have a look to the camera settings again. And the camera, so this was Nikon D800 with the lens 24 to 85 millimeters. And then from the camera settings, ISO 400, 52 millimeters, f16, 1/30th of a second. Now, looking at it, different cameras, so obviously different result, but similar settings. Again, the ISO on 400. David, as much as if you can, invest a little bit of money in a tripod, or if you have one, try to use it more to get an advantage of being able to lower the ISO. It will definitely help. You will get a reduce of lots of noise there. And I mean, once I zoom in, you can really see lots of noise coming out here. And some of the noise is so strong that basically the shape's starting to disappear. They look so soft that it just doesn't look great. So definitely your main goal and something you should take out of today's review show is to try to achieve shooting with 100 ISO. After that, 52 millimeter is great. F16 again. That's just to find out what is the main reason you're shooting with a higher f-stop. In general, lenses on your camera are the best. Generally, are the best around f7.1, f8, f9. And they're usually good all the way until f11. After that, when you go higher, unless there is a specific reason why you keep it that way, where, for example, with the first capture, you could say, I went for the higher f-stop to get the star effect, where on the second one, there is no such thing. And really, to get the most out of your lens, especially when it's noisy like this already with 400 ISO, stick to the f7.1 or around that much, because it will give you the best result. So I always like to stay for landscape photography between f7.1 and f11 as much as I can. And if I can't, then I can play around. Or if there is a specific reason for specific effect, I'm going for super long exposure or something like that, then I play around with the f-stop. But my standard setting when I start, when I get to the location and I find the right composition is ISO 100, f7.1, and in an aperture mode where I let the camera to choose my shutter speed. After that, I always shoot in 3 brackets. So basically I have one normal exposure and +1 and -1 on my exposure. So I always know that I will get details in the sky and also in the shadows. So that would be my setting, and that's where I would start. Once you get more comfortable, you can start to use the manual and so on, but that would be my first start, and you will see you will get great results there. Moving on. When it comes to composition, once again, I really like it. I think the reflection is great. I'm a big fan of reflection as a composition element. I think it really, really works very well. It's always very powerful. It creates a sense of symmetry, which I think works great. And it really just creates very artistic look. I think the reflection is good. Once again, I would have wished there was a little bit of more space at the bottom, but other than that, it's great. Everything is nice and straight. The horizon is straight, and that's that. When it comes to post-processing, again, I think it's also very nicely done. The contrast is nicely done. The brightness, the highlights blown out, I think works really well here. So all in all, I'm not going to do anything to this image. I think you've done really well here. So congratulations on this capture. That brings us to next photographer. John, moving on pictures from you. And we have two images right here. John, just as a request, next time when you send me a pictures, I understand for sharing on websites and social media, keep the watermark there. There's no problem. You whatever you need. But just like if you would send your pictures to judging or any kind of reviews, they would ask you not to put the watermarks and signatures there. And I'll tell you the main reason. For example, on this image right here, human eyes get automatically attracted by brightest or by contrast, but which in this case is the brightest part of the image. So when I look at the image, the first place my eyes goes to is the signature. And then immediately, as we are graphically kind of intuitive, I start to think about, why did you choose this font, why this color, why is it cut off, and so on. So just as a suggestion, when you send it next time, just try to stay away from the watermark. So let's move on to picture itself. We have hippo here, and we have this lovely pier. Now I was trying to think, where is this? Because where I live in Chichester, south of England. This doesn't look like any place around me. However, maybe if you are around, you can leave it in a comment, or if you watch it in replay, make sure that you write it in the comments so I can see where this place is. Starting with the first one, you captured this with Nikon Z9 with the lens Nikon 100 to 400. From the camera settings, you are on ISO 100, 140 millimeters, so really nicely zoom in, f6.3 and 1/800th of a second. So from the camera settings here, ISO 100 is exactly what I was mentioning earlier. Really good setting to make sure that we don't add any additional noise. 140 millimeters, obviously nicely punched in on the animal. f6.3, giving you decent sharpness when I look at it. There is the animal, and then lots of sharpness still all the way through, and 1/800th of a second, making sure that you get sharpness on the animal and as much details as possible. And actually, the result is really nice. I really like it. I think it's nicely done. Usually in this scene, the common thing is that these animals living in a similar environment. Well, what I'm trying to say is that when you look at the animal and its color and texture, how it blends with the water and the background. And that's very common. For example, with deer. How many pictures of deer you see where the deer is standing and then it has a very similar color behind it. So then it blends together, and it's actually really difficult to bring the focus mostly on the animal itself. So this is something what in this picture is the first thing that strikes me, is the fact that you have the animal and there are some brighter parts which obviously make the attention, but then there is lots of other things happening around it. It's like this really busy bush and everything else. So just something to think of next time as an upgrade for this type of photography would be to find a position where you could place the animal behind, in front of something that has a little bit of contrast. Other than that, it's nice, quite nice. It's nice, soft, diffused light, little bit of reflection there. There is plenty space around the animal, so well done on that. When it comes to editing, let's bring it into edit module. Look at it there and see if we could do something a little bit different. Let's crop it to cinematic 16:9. Maybe it's going to be a little bit too tight, but we can then move it into free and just make it a little bit bigger. So let's say that we go for something like that. So we really punch in, focusing on the animal itself. I would maybe go even higher and do something like this. After that, definitely a stronger vignette. So to bring more focus on the animal. And you can then choose where you want the center of the vignette to be. Also, you can add a little bit of light in the center to bring that up. To top it off, what we could do, we could add a little bit of clarity or texture to it, just again to make the animal stand out. Here in Luminarnio, you can do it in a structure or clarity slider in Lightroom Classic. So let's say that we really add fair bit. And what we're gonna do, we're just gonna apply it locally. So we're gonna use a little bit of masking brush and make the brush a little bit bigger and just paint over the areas we want to add clarity to. So something like this. Let's have a look. That's much better, I think. So now we have a little bit of extra clarity there. To top it off, what I would do, I would make the background just a little bit darker. So to do that, we're going to use simple develop tool with a little bit of exposure down. And then we're just going to use erase, and we're going to erase the dark parts from the animal. So something like this. So we're basically going to have the animal brighter and everything else just a little bit darker. So something like this. Let's have a look before and after. Now, I think that this picture would also look great in black and white if you would want to, but it doesn't have to. And you could also try to apply some nice LUT to it to get a little bit of different color. So let's have a look what we could do here. For example, something like this, where we get a little bit more like a fuller contrast that the Kodak LUT works really well. Or let's have a look if there is something more interesting. This is all a little bit too colorful. This is all a little bit too much. Let's have a look. So I think probably the Kodak actually looked the best for me. So something like this, and leave it there. Once again, let's have a look at the before and after. And I think the result is much better. So this is few things you could do with that image, and we'll leave it there. Now let's go back to catalog, and let's jump on the second image from it. Now let's make it nice and big. And again, start by looking at the camera details. This was captured with Olympus 12 to 100 millimeters. And I'm not sure what the camera was, but that doesn't matter. We can move on to the camera settings. Maybe it almost looks like it was captured with mobile phone, but I'm sure it wasn't for the long exposure. So talking about what we're looking at, we have ISO 64, 47 millimeters, f11, 120th of 120 seconds. So super long exposure here. What do you get? You get a really smooth water, a lovely sky with a streak that looks all great. So altogether, let's start by ISO 64. Obviously, the lower, the better. Although sometimes when you go under 100, you can actually reintroduce some noise to the image. F11, for this case, it's a great choice, making sure that we get the sharpness all the way through. And 120-second is a really, really long exposure. So let's zoom in and see how you did with sharpness. Now, there is a little bit of softness. And when I'm looking at it, usually when I see this kind of pattern and texture on the image, it reminds me sharpening with topaz. I may be wrong, to the plugin. I may be wrong, but I would say that maybe you try to sharpen it again, and the result is still a little bit blurry. But no wonder with 120 seconds, you can end up with some really, a slight wind or anything to the camera can add shake to it. The beach also doesn't have a very natural structure. When you look at it, you see it has this kind of patches of different texture. I don't know if you can see it, but hopefully like this, you can see it. You get this kind of different patch, bright with lots of little dots, and then darker. So again, maybe it is from the post-processing, but doesn't look really natural that much. The water, there are some parts here which kind of appear and disappear. And there are some parts here where you can see that maybe you done some cloning to it. You get these kind of straight lines, which are a little bit visible here. So again, something maybe to look at in the future. So in overall, John, there's definitely some stuff. 120 seconds is a brave choice, and the result, when it works, can actually end up being really interesting. However, I think it's not really sharp. Some of the editing is visible on the image, and there are some really strong artifacts of texture and noise, and also some glow around some items. So just keep trying, definitely. I mean, if it's something that interests you, if the long exposure is something you would like to try, definitely try, go for it. However, maybe you need to spend a little longer on post-processing. And I mean, the sharpness of the image itself, you need to make sure that you manage that in camera. Really sturdy tripod is the first thing you need. Second thing, ideally you have a release control which you can just press without touching the camera. After that, from the bottom of the tripod, you can put your backpack to make it even heavier, to make sure that it stays. I usually also stand towards the tripod and with the wind coming from my back, so that way I act a little bit as a shield protecting the tripod. And then really you just need to be patient and try it several times. You make sure that the tripod is super secure, that it's sturdy, that it holds. Then you press the shutter on the remote control, and then you just wait, take several pictures, and see what you get. That's the best shot on how you can get a sharp result. Now, talking about composition, it's actually really nice. I like the foreground of the beach. I like the water. I think that works really well, even though the water a little bit blend and merge together with the background. The pier is really nice. Coming from this side, I think it's lovely. There is lots of space around. So it's more the technique rather than the artistic part, because I think the composition is lovely. One thing I would definitely try to crop it a little bit more cinematic with, again, something like 16:9. I think that would really make better punch on the picture itself, and it would get a little bit more impact. Coming to my old photography teacher, he always told me that if that part of the image doesn't add anything to the composition, it doesn't need to be there. And looking at the beach, there is a little bit too much of it. There's no need for that. And with the sky, similarly, there's a little bit too much. So if you can avoid it, which in this case I would do with the 16:9 crop, I think you can end up with something like this, which is a little bit more powerful. Now, that's that, John. Thank you very much for sharing your pictures with us. I hope to see more in the future. And now it's time to move to Zdeněk. Zdeněk, what will we have? Rhinos. So let's jump on it. Let's zoom in and see what we have. I wonder if it's the same rhinos, but it looks like it's the same path. Just maybe this is like a close up and this is more a landscape capture. So let's talk about it. Let's have a look. Both of them captured with the same camera. Canon 77D with the lens 55 to 250 millimeters. Now, talking about camera settings on the first one, 100 ISO, 55 millimeters, f5.6, 1/250th of a second. So from the camera settings, all spot on, 100 ISO, all good, 55 millimeters, giving you a nice natural result. f5.6, was it maybe to keep the shutter speed in control? Not sure there. Maybe you were focusing on the animals. Still, it gives you actually quite nice look. When you're shooting wide like this, even though the f-stop is a little bit lower, you still get sharpness pretty much all the way through. So it's not a big deal. I think in overall, it actually works really well. So they are the same rhinos. Very cool. So then, my question would be, before I continue, Zdeněk, do you live close to place like this, or do you have to travel to go and photograph them? That would be my question there. And in the meantime, I'm gonna continue looking at it. So from camera settings, I think we all good. The light is quite good. Obviously, we get some stronger shadows here, but in overall, I think it works really well. Now, zooming in, the sharpness is really good, especially on the animal. Then when we look at the mountains, the only thing I see here is a little bit of chromatic aberration on the top. You can see that kind of, if I zoom in closer, just to make sure that you can see it, you can see this like a really green, yellowy, orangey edge, which is visible when you zoom in. That could be because of the direction of the light hitting your camera, or also maybe you done a little bit of adjustments to the sky and end up with this. So that would be probably the main thing which I would be looking at. Other than that, I think technically it's well done. When we're talking about composition, now looking at it, I think one thing has to give. Either it's going to be the mountains, because when you look at it, you have the foreground, which is a little bit close to the edge, and they are really small. And then you have the beautiful mountains, but they are a little bit too far and too big. So I don't know if it's a question of cropping it closer to the rhinos and maybe just play around with these hills here, or if it would be a question next time of bringing the camera a little bit more down and getting more out of them. So let's try, for example, if we would just go 16:9 and go nicely down and actually really just use the valley and get something like this, if it would work. And I think that's actually it gives me more impact using more of the rhinos. The first picture is nice as well, but when you're photographing animal like this, when I look at it, my first attention goes to the animal. I've seen mountains before so many times, and they are great, but because they are quite small, because you're a little bit far away from them, I would probably rather focus on them. And I think one way to focus on them would be to crop it a little bit more. Yes, the environment is important. We don't want to get reduce of them, but reduce of it. But I think something like this does have a little bit more punch in. That's where I would take it from there. Also, by doing this, you're going to get a reduce of the chromatic aberration. That would be my suggestion for this one. So that would be great kind of entry image for the series of picture. How much you want to crop it would be completely up to you. You could go really big, and then you even end up with the animals on your rule of third, or just like we did a moment ago, where you have a little bit more of the valley, which I think gives us a little bit more storytelling. You can see the road going through, you have the background, which really replaces a little bit of the sky, and you get a really nice result. Now, the background has a little bit of blue haze, which I think in this case actually works quite nicely, because again, it gives you a sense of like a sky. It looks like a sky on the picture. So that's really cool. 500 kilometers. Where would I have to go? So this is like when I want to go and photograph puffins here in UK. It's about 500 kilometers to drive north to see a first place where you can see puffins. So similarly, sometimes it's just worth the trip. So talking about coming back to the composition, this is where I would leave it. Once we here already, let's talk a little bit more about what else we could do. And I think in this case, because everything looks very natural, it's just a question of guiding the human eyes and making sure that we're focusing on the animals. So simple things like easy vignette, something like this, more position towards the animals would be first thing. Then, of course, using the develop with down on the exposure and then linear gradient, just closing the image from that part, bringing more attention here. What else we could do? We could try different things, maybe just a little bit more structure just to make it more punch out would be a good idea as well, somewhere around 20. We could close it from the bottom a little bit more if we would want to. Let's have a look, just zoom out a little bit. Also, maybe trying different LUTs to kind of make it alive, but I think it's all quite good. So in overall, I would probably leave it. I quite like it. I like it like this. It's natural. You can easily recognize the animals. We have the leading line through. We have the lovely valley here, which shows and replace a little bit of the sky. I think in overall, I would leave it like this. Let's go back and then focus on the picture of the actual animals. And talking about cameras, so is it the same camera? Yes, same camera, same lens. This time with the camera settings, ISO 100, 200 millimeters, f5.6, 1/250th of a second. Brilliant, brilliant. So ISO down, punched all the way in, obviously not to come close to the animals. f5.6, yep, giving us a lovely result here. 1/250th of a second, giving us lovely, lovely details on the animals, which are great. I love this picture. I think definitely already like this, you could go ahead and print it, put it on your wall. I think it would look great. So really happy about this. It looks all natural. A little bit of a shame that there are some stronger shadows, but sometimes you can't win. I think it just looks great. The framing of the picture is great as well, kind of with extra space here, one rhino towards you, one sideways, so you kind of enjoy both of the views. Just great, just great. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful picture. So when we bring it to the editing, just very simple things, again, more focusing on local adjustments. I think vignette would help us here. Lightly, but just kind of focusing more on the animals. Close it from the top, from the bottom, again with develop tool, something like this and this. Let's see if we could just do that and also that. I think that will help as well. So we focus more on the animals. Looking at the screen, it looks on your screen a little bit too strong, but if I maybe make it a little brighter, you will understand. So just somewhere around here, then we can definitely make them a little bit brighter if we would want to. Let's see with maybe like a dodge and burn, really low amount, bigger size, and we could just paint over the animals, just make them a little brighter, a little more interesting. There, just like with the previous picture, we were looking at the hippo, we could add a little bit of a structure, but this time again, just to the animals. And just add a little bit more focus on them. Another thing you could do, which is often used, is that you kind of unsaturate the image, everything other than them. But in this case, it doesn't really make sense because their bodies are already quite natural color. So I think the green still give us a nice contrast. And anyway, when you look at the image, how it's framed and cropped, you immediately know what's the main target and what's the main subject. And I think it really helps. Really not much I can do to it because I think it's already a great picture. Once again, definitely one that I would be happy to print and put on the wall because it just looks great. Similarly, the first one, but obviously this as an opener for the series and then moving on with this, I think together they are brilliant. I love the results, Zdeněk, and they are some of my favorite wildlife photos from you. So well done, great editing, great camera settings, superb result. So that's about it for this week. What time is it? 6:37 here in UK. Last week we were talking about going for bluebells, photographing them here. Obviously, that is all out of the way now. Most of these early forest flowers now disappeared, so we're moving on some other stuff. Late spring coming in. Definitely in this part of the world, now you can catch some of the best sunsets and also sunrises because you still get a little bit of rainy clouds. The weather change often, but that's the best time to capture beautiful skies because usually the best sunsets I captured is after it rained and then you get a little peak of the sun and you just create beautiful scenes. So wherever you are, if you are shooting landscape now, it's really great time to go out and capture them there. And that's about it. So we will be back again next week. I would really like to see a little bit more pictures. There are links on where to upload them already available in the academy as well as the Facebook group. So if you're there, make sure you use it. Send us 1 or 2 pictures. It really is up to you. I would love to see them. We can talk about them, break them down, and give you some handy tips and tricks. Folks, thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you had a great time. Stay safe, take care, have a great week, and I can't wait to see you again next week on Monday, 6 p.m. live here from UK.